I'm going to go ahead and get started with this. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My talk is about teaching new software testers. This is me. This is basically all you need to know about me. If you go to these two places, you will find out more about me than you probably ever wanted to. I do use Twitter fairly extensively in the sense that it is the I follow software testers, software developers, and a few iconoclastic individuals that I keep in touch with. But it is a very, very tightly curated feed. So this is where basically my world of software testing exists, and it's where I communicate about it. And I also have a blog, mkltesthead.com. The blog is called Testhead. The Miseducation and Re-Education of a Software Tester is the byline for it, and a lot of that helped inform a lot of what goes into this. So who is this for? Basically, it's for anybody that interacts with a software tester, whether they're brand new or they are veterans. Because if you're around long enough, you realize that old ways of thinking will not solve new problems. You cannot solve the problems of today with the line of thinking that created those problems in the first place. You will always have to adapt. You will always have to look at new ways of thinking. And so even us vets who think we are pretty hot stuff have to take a step back and realize that we might be able to learn a thing or two too. And, oops, sorry. One of the things I think is absolutely critical, I'm going to keep knocking this off, I'm sorry. When you want to talk about software testing with somebody that you think is a good potential candidate, or you want to introduce the world of software testing to, or you want to, in any way, shape, or form, interact with something, don't talk to them. I mean, don't preach software testing to them. Give them something to test. I think that is critical because you can actually see how they work, how they look at a problem, and you can also see if they can spur in you new paths of thinking. You find somebody that is curious, interested, engaged, and can generate you thinking about new avenues to go because they're asking questions you didn't think to ask. That's a gold mine. Invest in it. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to look at something here. This is where I like to start. So if you go to blackboxpuzzles.workroomproductions.com. This is my friend James Lindsay's site. James Lindsay runs Workroom Productions out of the UK. And he has put together a fairly robust group of what are called black box machines, in the sense that they are literally black box machines. You have no idea what they are doing. Almost nothing is labeled. You have buttons. Anybody got there? Blackboxpuzzles, workroomprods.com. Just pick one and open it up. And you should be able to get, just pick a puzzle. There you go. Perfect. Now I'm going to give you guys, I will give ladies and gents, I will give you 5 minutes.
It's not even loading. After loading, you can give us 5 minutes.
Okay. Or you can jump over here and take a look. So this you might want to edit this out or foreshorten it just a little bit. But in this case, so when I bring this up, and I encourage people to come together to look at these, I give them as little information as possible, other than to say, here's a black box. If you want to come around and take a look at it so you can also interact with it too. There's like 20 of them, so anytime somebody picks one, you're never quite sure which one they're going to get.
You just put together these random puzzles like that?
Well, they're not random. They're not random. They all have specific purposes, but each one has, you know, some interesting little surprises in them, and it's fun to see what people do and how they find certain ones. Like, for example, I've seen people do this particular puzzle. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I've seen people do this particular puzzle, and they've never clicked that camera button.
Really?
Never clicked it. And there's other things on the screen that they've never looked at or didn't touch, and I think,
Yeah.
why didn't you do that? And it's
Right.
because I was caught up in thinking about, and what's fun is that you get to explain, if you did this,
Right.
this would have happened. If you did this, this could have happened.
Right.
And by doing this, you get this reaction. And if you open up another puzzle, totally different
Right.
set of rules can
That one doesn't
apply.
even have the camera or anything.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And sometimes there are, there are little components that I would say, did you press this? And they said, well, no. I said, but it was staring at you,
Right.
right? You
Yeah.
saw that thing there. Didn't you just want to take a look at it
So is
and
this
see what's there?
to get people to think outside the box when they're testing? And
Definitely, more than just thinking outside the box. This is good for two purposes. One is, remember I said before, you can't teach somebody curiosity, but you can see if the seeds of curiosity is there. You can see what they do, how they go about it, if they ask you questions, and what type of questions they ask you. That's what you're minding. This is an exercise. This is a performance.
Yeah.
But what you're interested in is seeing all the little meta things
Right.
that pop out of that performance.
Mm-hmm.
That's the stuff you want to then review and talk about. When you want to start talking about testing and developing testing skills, you want to do it from I noticed that you like to do this,
Right.
this, and this. I can use that. Or I noticed that you didn't focus on this and this and this. Those are kind of important areas, so I know that here's a place I want to spend a little extra time on, or we want to make sure that we focus here. But it also shows me that I need to find a way to inch you into that and get you
Right.
excited about it so that
Right.
it'll be easier to teach. Whereas, oh, I noticed you jumped here and you did this component, or you noticed this little piece that other people hadn't. So you're a perimeter.
Right.
You like going around the perimeter and looking for the weird corner edge cases. That's cool.
Right.
We can use that.
Right.
And I can introduce you to some interesting problems that other people might not even want to consider. Good to know.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody else might be, you're a component level. You like really drilling down and looking at, like you spent 20 minutes on one button,
Right.
looking at every possible permutation of that one button. That's also interesting.
Yeah.
Because that means that you are somebody that I can go in and I can look at like an atomic level of granularity to be able to determine if something, is like you're a perfect state, state case tester. I will mark that down. Make sure I remember that. Or whereas somebody else, you're great for border, boundary class partitioning and all that other stuff. If you throw those terms out to somebody who's never tested before, they just,
Yeah, of course.
what?
Oh, yeah.
But whereas once you've done this and they've seen it
Right.
and they've interacted with it, now when you say, when you were looking at that, you were looking at all these little corner things and you were trying all these things out that were just way out there, that's boundary classes and that's how this fits together. Now they got something they can hang it on.
Right, right, right.
And I will mention this also
Yeah.
in the camera too.
No,
All right, so 5 minutes are up. Regroup. So, can you tell me specifically what your black box does?
It was just recording our mouse actions where we were going. That's what the
That's what,
puzzle did.
that's what your puzzle did. So, was that the purpose of the puzzle?
I guess so.
Are you sure?
It doesn't look like, it should, like,
This is a trick question.
yeah.
But the answer is yes, that is what it should be doing if that's what you were focusing on and that's the model that you built.
No, I wasn't focusing on, I wanted to know why is that moving and then turns green when it's moving this way, it turns blue and it turns red. thing that what they were that bar.
Cool.
And at one point we moved it right into the end of the other side of the bar, and after that we clicked, it turned blue, right? And then after that I moved it again, and I wasn't doing anything. It kept on moving back and forth, back and forth.
Well,
I think they get.
so what I would be doing right about now is, as you're talking about what you're looking at with this is where I would start to transition to say, okay, cool. So you built a model, mental model of what this application is. And based on that mental model, you explored this application and you learned parameters as to how you think that it works. Is that right or wrong? Actually, it's both. It doesn't really matter, because what the machine does is not the interesting information. The interesting information is, how did the person or people interact? The platform is deliberately vague. And I encourage anybody when they do these examples, I don't keep much in my head about what they do, because I'm not really interested in what they do. I'm interested in seeing what people interpret from it and what they come up with. And if they're coming up with things that I would have never considered, that's a checkpoint where I say, I need to talk to this person. They've got something that I want to learn more about. You also see how people interact with it. Like you had a little camera up in the corner. Oh, I wonder what that is. Oh, look, here's all this sway of it. I've actually given this as an example, that particular puzzle, and I have watched people sit in front of it for 20 minutes and not click that button.
Why?
We don't know.
The button is there.
Right.
And I wanted to see, I was
Yeah.
thinking that camera is going to start recording us.
But that, and the point is that you noticed it, and you thought, I wonder what that does. Let me explore that. Whereas somebody else might have said, I'm more interested in the actual physical control of the box itself. I'm going to figure out what makes it slide. How does it do it? So they focus on a core level where something on the outside might give them interesting information. They don't even see it. It's not that they don't click on it because, they didn't even see it. I actually point out, did you see that there's a camera here? Oh, yeah, I guess there is. That's not meant to be you're out of here. Your attention to detail stinks. No, their attention to detail was focused on something else. So I would say, okay, let's see, what were you thinking? What did you model? What did your model build? How did you make that? And what were the key features you focused on? And you find out this is somebody who is so ingrained on figuring out what component of that button made the bar move that they were mapping out in their mind every conceivable permutation. Is there a dial they couldn't see? If they spun the button, did it do something? If they pressed it fast, did it do something? If they slid it, if they X'd it, they were so focused on that button that they were coming up with crazy, radically random ideas that on the surface you would think it's just gibberish. But then when they explained what they were thinking, you realize they were building a model just around that button because they really wanted to understand what that button could potentially do. That's a cool thought process. You want to leverage that. Whereas somebody else might say, I've got this big grouping vision and I saw every single speck on the screen, and if there was something that I could maybe do something with, I was going to jump on it and I was going to explore it, even if I only explored it for a second. That's another skill that's worth discussing and nurturing, because they have a broad view and they're great at doing skim searches. Because you do a skim search and you look at something that nobody else would think to look at, but there's this little pixel over here. Hey, what happens if I blow up that pixel? Is there something interesting there? Could I actually look at what the screen is there? Is there something that might give me a hint at what's going on under the application? I'm jumping ahead in this, but each of those are individual skills that you as a facilitator can take some notes on and say, all right, I want to come back and explore that more. Because not only does it help you understand if somebody's curious, but what makes them curious. And for different people, it's going to be different things. So you don't want to build a team of cookie cutter people. You want people that have different interests, that have different focuses, that have different ideas of how something should work. Because when you put them all together, you get a synergy. Whereas if everybody does the same thing and they're indoctrinated the same way on the proper way of doing something, then you just get the same thing repeated over and over again and no new learning happens. In a way, it's like a regression suite that never fails a test. Is it worth anything at that point? Not really, right? Because you're not learning anything new. If something changes and you get a red flag, oh, we better go take a look at that and see what's going on, yeah. But 99.9% of the time, the vast majority of your tests that you run automatically never have a problem. Which, depending on how you want to look at it, means they're either very good or completely useless.
What if you're a one-person QA team? How do you...
Happens a lot. And if you're a one-person QA team, you have to develop a lot of different skills. And you have to outsource.
How can you say one person and a team?
Because if you are a lone tester in an organization, you are a team.
One person as a team of itself?
No,
Then?
no.
Have a lot of hats.
Yeah.
Have a lot of hats, but you also need to be, how do I say it, collegial and persuasive, in the sense that you can't do it all yourself. Really, you can't. You need to recruit others to help you.
Exactly.
But you're not going to be able to recruit them in the classic manner. You're not going to necessarily be able to say, hey, can you drop everything you're doing and help me make sure we hit this testing milestone? That's not going to work. At least it hasn't worked in any company that I've worked at. But if you have a collection of lollipops at your desk, or if you go home and you make Reese's peanut butter cups and you bring them into the office and say, hey, who's a big fan of dark chocolate and honey roasted peanut butter cups? I am. Can I borrow you for 15 minutes? If I can, this is yours. Yeah, absolutely. So I need some insights on what this app is doing. Can you help me dig in and get into some of the code guts here so that I can ask you some questions? Or we can do something here. Or I need to do some human factors testing. I need somebody who's not me, because I interact a certain way. I need other data. I need another person to interact with this. That's not me with my biases, getting ahead of myself. So if you are a lone tester on a team, yeah, your T is a little fatter, but you're also going to be reaching out to other people who can help you, who you can borrow from their expertise. You can learn a little bit from them, and you can teach them. It's a two-way street. Every time you interact with somebody as a tester, you're giving some of your testing skill to them, and they're giving some of their paraprofessional skill in some other avenue to you that you can then use later on. And that way, everybody starts to develop and everybody gets that testing mindset. And once that testing mindset hits in, it starts to infect you. And you start to think of things as a tester, even if you're not one. And if you are a lone tester and you really need help and you really need somebody in a pinch and you need to scale up your QA team for just a couple of weeks or a couple of days or a couple of hours, I promise you, go over to where your tech support organization is if you have one. Bring some lollipops and some peanut butter cups or buy beer, whatever, and say, after work, hey, you guys want to have a little bit of a party? I need some help. Are you willing to stick around for an hour and take a look at something with me? I kid you not, you are going to find one of your best crack test teams on your customer support organization because they have developed a tester's skill set, but they've developed it in reverse. They're forensic experts. They, instead of looking to see if they can find a problem, they're usually presented with the problem. And then they have to find out how you got there. And oftentimes figure out a workaround while somebody's on the phone screaming bloody murder. Leverage that. It's wonderful. And if you're not naturally a tech supporty kind of a person, that's not a skill set that's going to be automatically available to you. But they're experts at it, and they can teach you how to do it. So I'm sorry, I'm killing this too long.
Is it a 10? Yeah.
Yeah. So these are some of the questions that I would ask when we have the, what did you notice? What did you use to figure out what to do? Did you take advantage of anything on the screen? How did your approach differ from your teammates? And what would you do differently if you were to mentor another tester in this exercise? So an example is, on each one of these puzzles, there's a little gear, and there's a question mark over it. I cannot count how many times I have watched people do this exercise and never click the question mark. Like that. So you click the question mark and you get all this credit information, right? And if you take the,
But it doesn't, it just blinks and goes away.
if you don't hold the mouse down.
Yeah.
Well, could be, but the idea is if you hold the mouse down, it will actually keep the window open. And if you keep the window open long enough, usually every 10 seconds, a little hint pops up. That little hint gives you a question. Did you think to press all the buttons? Can you press more than one button at a time? What happens if you do this? It gives you little pops and little jogs. And that can help you as well. But the idea is you won't be rewarded with it if you didn't think to look at it and take the time to read and notice, hey, this is changing. That might be interesting. So that's where I use this as an example of how can you develop curiosity and how can you nurture that curiosity. So I'm going to step over here and say, let's talk about lesson 0. When you want to talk about software testing, I believe the very first thing you should teach anybody is the scientific method. Scientific method. Have I lost anybody here? Because sometimes I do. People go, wait, what? Why would you make that the most important thing to learn? Because that's really where testing gets its essence. It's what it is. And many of us, sadly, have either never been brought up with that as a paradigm, or we've forgotten about it because we think of testing in the rote because we take a test. We're given a piece of knowledge, and then we have to sit down, and we've got a Scantron form that we then have to fill in a bubble, and that's a test. We're testing to see if you know something. We're testing to see if something behaves the way that a spec tells us. And so we have this very myopic, narrow view of what testing is. No wonder we're bored. Whereas when you think about the scientific method, think about every great advancement that's ever happened in history. How has it come about? It's come about because somebody had what they thought might have been a harebrained idea. And they decided to do an experiment to see if the harebrained idea would hold up to scrutiny. And that's why the scientific method is the core of testing. It's why I think you should teach any aspiring tester to learn about it, know about it, and ingrain it into what they do. So for those who are not familiar with the scientific method, very basic steps. You ask a specific question. What do you want to know? What is the thing that you want to be able to pay attention to? You want to perform background research on the question you want to ask. So you want to get just, whether it's your product or anything else you want to, just anything you want to learn about, right? Let's say you want to learn about quantum mechanics, or you want to learn about calculus, or you want to learn about, I don't know, Sri Lankan dance music and what makes it unique. You want to learn about how the semitones differ from Western music, right? Well, how could you figure that out? There are any number of ways, but probably the easiest way to figure it out is to say, I'd like to actually experiment with instruments that would make those tones. Whereas if you don't have those, or you never thought to ask that, you might never even get to that point. So you construct a hypothesis based on the question and the research. And then you experiment. You play around with it. You fiddle with the knobs enough so that you can find out if your hypothesis holds up to scrutiny. And then, it says the data, whoops, analyze the data that you accumulate, and you draw a conclusion. And the conclusion will either be, my question holds up, or my question has holes in it. I've disproven my original question, but that's given me another one to ask. And the whole process starts again. Also, key to it is being able to communicate your results and be willing and able to defend them, or be willing and able to discard them in favor of new information. And that's where a lot of people fall down. Because there's a lot of pride that gets wrapped up in testing and what we do. Because we're authorities, right? We know what we're doing. We are intelligent people, and we've spent a lot of time, and we've invested a lot of ourselves and our efforts, and our ego gets tied up in this. And if we're not willing to say, new information, my hypothesis is wrong, jettison it all, and let's start again, you're going to have a rough road. But if you do get a tester, especially a new one, who's willing to embrace this and willing to make this internal, oh, you're going to have a lot of fun, because they're going to be much easier to work with. So some things to consider is you want to create fair tests. A fair test, a fair experiment, means you want to look at things at a very granular level. If possible, focus on one variable, or figure out ways of isolating those that you don't have any control over, and just put them in a headspace and say, I can't do anything about this. That's up in the cloud. I have no control over it, but I can control this button. So I'm going to focus on this button. Think about how you would design your experiments. You don't have the time to test every possible permutation. You don't even really want to test every possible permutation. A great method that you can use is combinatorial testing. So let's say you have multiple machines and multiple video cards and multiple networking cards. Well, you can test atomically every one of those possibilities, but it's an exponential curve. And the more pieces you put in, the more exponential it gets, and you're going to be there all day. So instead, say, all right, I'm going to take this big possible matrix, and I'm going to look at how can I put two pieces of those together. And I'll still have a matrix, but it's going to have two components instead of just one. Suddenly, your thousands of test cases may trunk down to 50 or 30 or 19 even, because now you've taken out a lot of the complexity. Will you miss stuff? Yeah, maybe. But you'll probably catch the vast majority of what real people will look at. And then it comes down to what's the risk of these weird little outliers. I think it's important to teach abstraction to testers, because we do it all the time. I mean, if you look at anything in mathematics, if you look at any programming language, none of us sits around and types in zeros and ones on a line, right? Every one of us is, if you've done any programming or if you've done any interaction, you know, Windows, this software right here that makes this the screen happen. Underneath, there's so much stuff going on just to generate that. I couldn't possibly piece it together with zeros and ones or machine language or anything. I don't have that skill. So I'm used to the idea that we're stepping away all the time. There's a layer of abstraction for everything that we work with. And so getting people used to that idea, that vagueness, is really, really critical. And then also you want to be able to look at how credible is the information that we found, and who can I talk to compare notes with. So encourage peer review, and encourage other colleagues to work with them. And if you're the facilitator that's going to be working with this particular tester, you're their peer. Do not approach it as though you are their supervisor, or you're the one, I am your school teacher and I will show you what to do. Approach it as an equal. I want to hear what you're thinking. I want to be surprised. I want somebody to show me something that I never considered about this product. And I think you might be able to do that. So let's go at this. Not as, unequals, but let's look into this. And let's see what we both come up with. And if you surprise me, that's going to be awesome. And maybe I'll throw something at you that might get you on another path that, again, I wouldn't have thought of, but maybe I triggered it, and that's great. So this is my definition of what testing is. Ask a product a question, and you receive an answer. Based on that answer, ask another question, and see where the follow-ups lead you. Lather, rinse, repeat. Disagreements? So testing, oftentimes we think about, we verify things, right? We verify that something works as expected. Okay, that's a loaded term. What is as expected? Oh, usually it's based off of, it could be based off of a formal, written, documented, government mandated specification that it must do these things. Or it could be just like, yeah, our competitor does this, kind of like it, we decided to steal it. There you go. It's just as valid as any other. Some of them are a little more firm, some of them are a little more floaty-woaty, but verification. We spot errors. Can we trip up an application? Can we make an application behave in a way that's not consistent? One of my favorite techniques that I use, and it drives developers up a wall, and I thank James Whitaker for introducing this to me a long time ago. His idea of quick attack number one. If you really want to ruin a developer's day, here's a great way of doing it. If you have the skill to read code, go into their code and look for the error messages. Figure out where the error messages are in the code. Read them. See if based off of what you're looking at, you can figure out what would trigger those error messages. And if you can't, find somebody who can read code to help you so you can develop that skill. But figure out what will trigger those error messages. Now go and trigger them. Make them appear if you can. What you will likely discover is you will develop a really interesting cascade effect, and you will more times than not crash the application. Because when you start looking for errors and error handling, now you're in that ad infinitum space around that box. And now you're saying, how do they think they're going to handle an error? Okay, will it? Will it actually do this? If we throw an exception, will it pick it back up? Or will it empty me out into this weird nether alley space where all sorts of nefarious things go on? And more times than not, unhandled exceptions trash an application. And you can come back and go, yeah, I crashed the app. What'd you do? Well, I was trying to generate this error message, and it generated the error message, which generated another error message, which generated another error message, which caused an infinite loop and dead on floor. Seriously? Yeah, seriously. And so they're going back and looking at their error code, and after a while it's like, okay, Michael, no more. You don't look at that. Stop, stop. Next release, but do something else, no more. Yeah, you can make developers cry just by looking at their error code. But that's the idea, is that there are any number of techniques you can use, and that's not the point to this. But getting testers used to the idea of how can you trip up an app? How can you trip up what a developer expects that you can do? Not break it. I don't believe that we are in the business of breaking things unless we are deliberately going in to be destructive. For most test procedures, that's not what we're there for. Now, if you're going in doing penetration testing or black hat level hacking, okay, yes, your deliberate purpose is you are trying to destroy the app, or you're trying to thoroughly compromise it the way that somebody would do so under nefarious purposes. 99% of people aren't going to try to do that. And management will probably tell you 99% of people will not try to do that. And this is irrelevant. No, it's not irrelevant. But it's a small subset of test cases you have to consider if you want to be successful. So most of the time, you're not really going out of your way to break an app. You're going out of your way to be the beat reporter to discover how an app is broken. So we want to deliver value. Does this really meet the needs of our customers? And how do we figure that out? One of the nice techniques I like to encourage people to do, and I love the metaphor of being a beat reporter much better than I like being, that tackle at the end of the field. And they say, I'm going to prevent you from crossing into the touchdown zone. I will tackle you and I will destroy you. I'm much more into the idea of I'm the beat reporter, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to ferret out the story. I want to know what this application's doing. I want to know who, what, where, when, why, and how of this application. And I want to be able to think, what would be the worst headline that my CEO, when he picked up the morning paper and opened it up or logged onto the screen, what would be the most horrific thing that they could see about their company and their product in bold print? My job is to find out what that headline is and prevent it from ever hitting the newspapers. I want to tell them up front, hey, guess what? Here's the headline that's going to hit the newspaper if you release this product. But I'm being nice and showing it to you now. Wow, thank you for your investigative journalism. This is good to know. Or they might actually say, yeah, it's okay, we'll risk it. Okay, that's their call, right? And then the next morning when the paper hits, oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end, the worst thing ever happened. Yeah, I gave you that lead. You chose to bury it, and life's rough. So one of the things I also like to encourage is learning to ask what I call quality questions. If you get somebody that's new to testing, very often they're not going to really know how to ask these questions. They're not going to be sure of what they can do. And if you go to ask a harried, overworked, underslept developer to go help you fix a problem or learn something about a problem, you better go in and having done your homework. If you say, hey, I don't know how the Foombly formulator works. Can you show me how it works? The developer's going to go, yeah, let me Google that for you. Or, yeah, hey, here's our company documentation. Have fun, right? If you catch them on a good day, they might give you a little bit more of the time of day. But generally, if you come in with a question that is half-cocked, that's half-formed, that shows you didn't really give them much time, they're not going to give you much time either, But if you instead come in and say, hey, you know what? I really want to know more about the Foombly formulator thing here, this little component over here. Now, I've checked into the spec. I've checked into the fact that our competitors have a product kind of similar to this, and their product behaves this way, and our product behaves this way. And based off of that, I see a disconnect here, but I'm not sure if I'm missing something or if I'm onto something. So is it possible that I can get a clarification on this point of this component in this situation? You come up with a question like that, developers are going to fall all over themselves looking to help you because you've done your homework.
It's like a Stack Overflow.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've ever been at Stack Overflow and you've ever actually read the way questions come in, what's the most common thing? If you give us some examples or if you give us some clarification, that actually should go over here. You obviously haven't done that. But if you come in and you're prepared, I did this, I learned this, I tried this, I did this, I compared this spec to this, I tried this functionality, and I'm getting this, and I'm sort of at my wit's end. What am I missing? You're going to get much better answers because you've done the homework to get rid of the most obvious stuff. Now you're in the territory of, that is interesting. Hold on a second, let me look that up. Or hold on, I don't know the answer to that, but I think my friend knows the answer to that. And you start this little game of telephone that goes on, and the more you've done the homework for, the more interested they are. And they'll bend over backwards because now you've piqued their curiosity, and they want to know why it's doing what it's doing. So I already covered that. So how can we help new testers formulate quality questions? Don't expect them to be able to solve a complicated problem with just a few seconds of research. Remember the statement I said earlier, you will not solve the pressing problems that you have with the same thinking that created them. Your testers need to have that same understanding, and they're not going to be able to come up with something, oh yeah, sure. Well, if they could, they wouldn't be your tester. They'd probably be your main architect designing your product better than you could. Encourage them to read and understand. Have them prepare their questions, let them think it through, and challenge your assumptions, which goes back to lesson 0. Think out your hypothesis, experiment on it, see if it holds water. How am I doing for time? 7:26, not bad. All right. Again, also encourage them to help in the process of developing a solution. You know, could someone provide me a pointer to this? What is my example missing? What should I have checked? Is there some piece of this equation that I'm not fully grasping? So there's a couple of links down here. There's much more detail, and again, this whole slide deck is going to be available to anybody who can't be here. What do testers find? This is a short list. There's a whole lot of things that testers find, but this is just my short list that I would throw out and say, yeah, we find bugs. We identify risks. We find issues. Notice, I identified those things uniquely because bugs and issues are not always the same thing. Testers find testability problems. Like, I can't test this. You want me to be able to test an API, but you don't have a possibility for me to get an answer if I don't have an authorization string. Not having an authorization string is a real testability problem. Giving me a 0 answer back or not giving me a reply back is a bad design for your API. So there's a testability problem there. We find artifacts. We find little things littered around the code all the time. You found the camera. You found the question mark. Those are artifacts, and those can lead you to interesting places. And we also find curios, which are just little weird pieces that you just sit there, and Michael Bolton does this great little bit where he talks about when he's describing a problem, and he does it all in sign language and grunts. Developer, come here. Blah! 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 Blah, 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 blah. I know that sounds ridiculous, but yeah, that's sometimes your reaction when you go across, you do something, you go, does that smell funny to you? Or does that taste funny to you? Different people have different reactions to it. There's a code taste, or a code smell, or a code sight, or something. It's like a dissonant chord. It hits you when you're expecting something and you just suddenly get this clang. I don't think that's right. I can't put my finger on why it's not right, but that just doesn't feel right. But now you got something to research and talk about. How many of you have to work with testers who have never done a day's programming in their life? It's becoming less and less. But if you're working with young kids, especially those who are in high school or middle school going into high school, classic intern age kids who are getting their first shot at work, it's still pretty common. The trouble you face when you try to talk about a programming scenario is you have to pick a language, and you have to start teaching them about syntax. And they spend so much time on syntax and understanding syntax to be syntactically correct with their syntax that they can't solve the problem because their heads are all wrapped around syntax that they don't have the experience of working with. That's why I throw them at this. This is a game, and we don't have time to play it here. I wish we did, because it's really cool watching how people interact with it. It's called Lightbot, and it is literally a straightforward, fairly straightforward game of a little robot with a light on top of its head and floor squares that you walk around, turn, jump, teleport, bounce, climb, drop, and at certain points you want to be able to light up the squares on the floor or turn off the squares and go light up something else. And the entire syntactical language are pictures, little blocks. Turn, jump, light, turn off, and little places where you can put in the box. It's a grid of 16 spaces. Now, as you might guess, after a certain time, as the problem gets bigger and bigger, and you've only got 16 spaces to work with, you're not going to be able to do everything you want to do in those 16 spaces. So it introduces, oh, look, you can group little things together. You can make functions or procedures or methods or whatever. But you're not talking to them about functions or procedures or methods. You're talking about, here's a group of commands that we can string together and we can treat as one. That's the thing you want to get them to think about. You want to have them solve the problem. And how they get to it might be different. There is no set absolute answer. In the early stages, they're pretty basic. And so it's, as long as you light up the code or complete the thing, however you chose to do it, that's up to you. Some are more efficient than others. Some do it in 4 steps, some do it in 6, some do it in 8. But if they get to the end of the equation, if they get to the end of the puzzle and they solve it, they move on. So it shows them that there's more than one way to do something. But the focus is on solving the problems. And as they do that, suddenly they realize, oh, this is a loop. Oh, this is what recursion is. I've heard that term, and I've been fighting to understand what that meant for years. And now you look at it and you go, yes, I get that, I think. Yeah, no, yes. No, yes, yes. And it's good to watch those lights come on. And again, this is another great example of where you start to see them think about how to solve a problem. And that starts to build into the syntax they work with. Now here's where I get on my soapbox. I hate the term quality assurance. I know that it's your business, QASource, all that. It's a term. It's an HR thing. It exists. Here's the dirty secret. Not a single one of us in this room can assure quality unless, and in very rare cases, you also have control of the source code and can actually make the physical changes. But are you QA at that point? No. Chances are at that point you're the developer or you're the architect or you are the founder of the company who's doing everything. Then you can assure quality, but even then, can you assure quality? Probably not. Because what is quality? Quality is something of value to a person or institution that matters and has influence. That's a little bit of a long, perverted Jerry Weinberg quote, but that's how I define quality. And it's tremendously subjective. What is perfectly cool for one person is horrible to somebody else. If you have an end user license agreement with a comma out of place, that's a disaster, especially if it leaves you open to being sued or not being able to collect money because it's interpreted the wrong way. Whereas for many of us, we don't even look at the end user license agreement. We could care less. What about that component that shuts down the app every time I try to render? That's much more important, right? Which one takes precedence? Where is the quality? Is that, render thing? Is that the most pressing thing? Well, it is if you're the person who wants to render it. But if you're the actual company selling the product and your end user license agreement says that you're going to basically end up paying somebody instead of them paying you, that's the most important piece. So quality is subjective, and it varies depending on who you're talking to. So ultimately, quality assurance is not a department. It is a process that an entire company has to practice for it to actually happen. What we can do is we can provide information. We can be the headlights for a project. We can give them the data, and we can defend the data that we have found. Or we can scrap what we have found and say, our hypothesis is wrong. We need to approach this from a different angle. And if we are sure of a problem, we can recommend that it gets fixed. Do we fix problems? Sometimes, if we have the wherewithal. In my build system, I do fix the problems. I've been given that. But sometimes I don't know how to. So I have to reach to somebody else and see if we can figure out what we're going to do. But in that case, yes, I guess I could say that I do have the wherewithal to assure the quality of Jenkins, but that's a loaded statement, isn't it? In most cases, though, all I can do is recommend that something be fixed, and somebody who is in a higher pay grade than me makes the ultimate call. And they say, yes, we're going to fix that, or nah, we can live with that. We'll take the risk. So one of the things I like to encourage, and we don't have time to do this, I'm trying so hard to keep this to a time limit, but if you get a chance to do this, break up into groups of 3 or 4. This might even be a great follow-on meetup for you guys to consider. Is what are attributes of good testers? What would you like to see your dream tester have? And get a group of people to discuss it and come up with a list. And you might be surprised when you're all swarming on it that what you think would be a great tester, and what you think would be a great tester, and what you think would be a great tester, when you synthesize it, hey, you might have some things that you didn't even consider in there. But yeah, now that you mention it, that's awesome. And what I thought was really critical, well, that's maybe lower on the list. And something I never even considered, it's really important. So the next group here is what we call what is context. And I will state categorically this is a term that gets thrown around a lot. And sometimes I feel that people don't really understand what context means, or they use it in a very lazy way. Would you test a video game the same way you would test a pacemaker? Oh, good grief, of course not. That would be ridiculous. But that's what's used oftentimes to talk about context. Well, you would do it one way for a video game, but you would do it another way for a pacemaker or for a heart monitor. Right. Okay. Yes. That's not so interesting. What about within the same product that you're working on? What about the project you're working on changes on a dime and you have to pivot? What do you do then? That's where context in my worldview is much more interesting. So there's a module that I have here, and I will send it to you separately because it's big. But we have this little card game that we play called Context-Driven Robots. And depending on which team you want to pick, your red team, orange team, or green team. And based on the color you pick, you get a testing scenario, a product scenario that defines what that product's going to do. As an example, one of them goes in and explores pyramids, or was designed for a television show to explore pyramids. Another one was designed to be companions for people with physical disabilities. And another one was designed to be, I'm spacing on it right now, but the idea was that each one of them had a unique, distinctly different function. But yet if you looked at the pictures, they were all the same thing. So it showed that you could create radically different contexts for the same class of product. But even more important is I would give you 3 scenarios. And the first thing I would do is, based on episode number 1, here's what I'm giving you. This is what we're got to do. Give me a test strategy. Don't take too long, 5 minutes. But give me a test strategy, what we want to cover for it. And they would give me their test strategy. And I'd say, oh, great. Episode 2, here's what's changed since the time I showed it to you. Oh, your time's now cut in half. Your budget has been blown out of the water. Whatever money you have in the bank now is all you're going to get for the project. You remember those 3 testers that we hired? 2 of them turned out to be really exceptional developers or security experts, and they got pulled off on another project. Now what are you going to do? Now context really matters, because your context for your project has changed dramatically, even though their deliverable, or what you're hoping to deliver, hasn't. And even they might decide, you know what? We're going to scrap this idea and we're going to go with this totally different concept, but we still need to get it out at the same time. That's what context really comes down to. And being able, so that's why using best practices or focusing on what is a best practices don't really exist. There are good practices that you can use in a particular context, and that context can change on a dime. And then what was a good practice then might be a terrible practice going forward. You have to pivot, you have to adapt. It's fun watching these people think through the problems and adapt. I hope I gave that enough time. Yeah. What are bugs and bug reporting? If you can give any tester a big leg up on their peers and really set a mark, it is to stop thinking about bugs in a generic sense. I'm oftentimes asked, what defines in your mind, if you had to have a metric to measure who a tester was and how good a tester was, what is your metric for that? And I say, my metric's actually pretty simple. I'm interested in the ratio of bugs found to bugs fixed. If you get me a tester who finds 50 bugs, but those 50 bugs are cosmetic, inconsequential, or nobody does anything about them, and 6 months later, 40 of them are still not fixed, but 10 of them are fixed, that gives me an idea of the effectiveness of that tester. Now give me another tester who only finds 10 bugs. Now on the surface you'd say, what? One tester finds 10, another tester finds 50? That's an easy answer. You know who the most effective tester is, right? What if I told you that person who found 10 bugs then chased those suckers down and got every single one of those 10 bugs fixed because they could convince the development and the management team that they were important enough to fix? Who's the 10? Yeah, 10 for 10, 100%. I'd take that tester any day. And there's ways you can get to that. So you want to be able to think about how you can make your bug reports persuasive and how you can advocate for them. And I'm going to give you a little gift. It's actually, no, I'm going to say it's a group of acronyms because they literally are acronyms. Anybody know the difference between an acronym and an initialism? Initialism. An acronym actually spells out a word. If something like IGRP, that's not an acronym. That's an initialism. At least I don't know of a word called IGRP. But ARP, that's an acronym because that's a word. So here you go. Here is a little group of acronyms in a mnemonic that you can remember. Can pig ride? I'll jump through those really fast. Condense it. Get it into the least amount of information you can to make your case. Be accurate. Be absolutely sure that you can define that and make the case for what it is. Back to scientific method. What's your hypothesis? Can you prove it? Neutralize it. Make it so that it is not, you're not being snarky, you're not being, don't get cocky, don't get, ah! Developer did something dumb, Hulk smash. No. Be dispassionate about it. Don't throw in humor, don't try to be silly or cute. Just make your case. Remember, a defect report is a technical document, and it may outlive you in the organization by a long shot. Be precise where you can. If you can't, spell out that you can't be precise. Like, I can make this happen 5 out of 5 times, or I can make it happen 3 out of 5 times, or I can make it happen only 1 out of 5 times, but with these parameters, it's much more likely to happen. That gives you a good level of granularity the developer can then work with. If you're wildly across the map and you're not precise with your language, it's hard to distill it. Isolate it. Figure out where it is happening. Figure out exactly what component matters. Generalize where possible. And by generalize, meaning, why would somebody care? What is the most specific factor? This is going to cost us millions of dollars. That's general. Plain and simple. Oh, okay, yeah, we better fix that. Whereas, under this interesting little circumstance, if we do this strange little thing that happens, you lose them in the weeds. They don't see the value to it. No, when this happens, we run the risk of losing $10 million in a day. Okay, let's work on that.
Numbers.
Yeah. Be able to recreate it, and also be able to emphasize the impact. Sell the drama. Every single bug report that you create is a marketing pitch. Get Mad Men about this. You are selling it. You are an advertising maven. And your ability of selling the bug has a huge impact on whether or not it gets fixed or not. Be able to debug it if possible. If there are tools that can help you isolate it, if you can get information, go into your log files, verify that you can confirm that, under this circumstance, this is happening on this line based on this function that's calling this method that upon further reflection doesn't exist on our system anymore. That's helpful. And again, evidence. What will prove that the behavior you're observing is indeed a bug? And remember, bugs have feelings too. So treat them with respect, and they'll treat you with respect. I'm only partially kidding about that. Actually, they will. Because if you are respectful to the bugs you find, and you report them not sensationally, not hyperkinetically, but you're very specific, matter of fact, direct, focused, and you try to sell the reason why this matters, you've got a much better shot at getting that bug fixed. Teach a new tester how to do this. Seriously, you can get a tester who's only been in the business for a couple of months. They'll outshine their peers who've been in the business for years, because many people who have been in the business for years have never figured this out. Hope you got that. All right, one area here, and this is one of the reasons, I did this in the particular order, and one area that I think is really critical that everybody learns to understand is bias is a stumbling block to testing. And every one of us has them. In some cases, we have lots of them. We go through this all the time. Every one of us carries a bias. I don't care who you are or how rational or Vulcan-like you think you are. You have biases. Some of them you don't even know about. Some of them you do know about and you don't care.
Should we?
Absolutely. You should care. You should care. Could you take a bias and set it aside? If you absolutely can't, I will categorically say you run the risk of diluting your skill as a tester. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to refute everything that you believe is sacred in the world. But you have to be willing to say, I know that this is a blind spot for me. I know that this is a bias. I am aware of it, and I will be alert to it while I am doing this. And if the case is I can't quite figure out how to get around it, I'll go ask somebody else to say, I've got a bias here. Can you help me? Because I don't think you have the same one. Okay. There are cultural things. You know, me as a Scandinavian, generally, dude, I have cultural baggage that I've brought over from my own upbringing and life and such that colors the way I view the world. That I'm going to guess that somebody from, I don't know, the People's Republic of China, or from the Congo, or from India or Sri Lanka, because of their upbringing, will look at the world in a totally different view. They won't have my bias. They'll have their own bias, but it won't be mine. And that's good because they can say, I think you're fixated on this because of some cultural norm that you're not even aware of, but I don't share that cultural norm and it doesn't bother me. So can I take a look at this? And the flip side, you'll come to me and go, okay, my cultural norm is getting in the way of this. Can you look at this for me, please? Of course. We don't see things as they are, plain and simple. We see them as we are. Favorite phrase is, I can see the world perfectly fine through my beautiful rose-colored glasses. So confirmation bias is the big one. If something matches your worldview, you are much more likely to accept it at face value than if it doesn't. And right now, all you got to do is if it's on Facebook, are you having fun with the political discussions going on? I'll bet you're not. But you can see it is Facebook is a wonderful ground for looking at cognitive biases and logical fallacies, because they're exercised all the time. And if you really want to lose friends quickly and you want to prune your friends group, point out that they are falling into cognitive biases and exercising logical fallacies. I promise you, your friends list will shrink dramatically. I'm only half joking there. Actually, it's true. People hate it when you point out their hypocrisy, when you point out their blind spots, when you point out their sacred cows.
No one can take negativity.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's important to realize every one of us has it. Confirmation bias is a real big one. So I'm going to ask you a quick question here. So imagine I'm your development manager, and I'm saying that we've got this release that's about to go out the door. It needs to go out on Friday. So you got 3 days for it. And I come in and say, hey, we've got this big feature, really excited about getting this out. I can't wait for get it out. I want you to give it a once over and let me know that everything's okay. And that's all I say. What have I just done? I have just seeded a bias in every one of your heads, unless you are cool, calm, and collected enough to realize that I just seeded a bias in your head. What were the words I just used? Give it a once-over and let me know that everything is okay. What did I, as the boss, just tell you? I don't want to hear that there's problems. I want this out the door. So do what you have to do to make sure it goes out the door. I'm giving this a heavy spin here, but that is what happens. When somebody verbally says, give this a once-over and make sure everything's okay, they are telegraphing to you that they're not interested in problems. They want it out the door. It needs to ship. We need the money.
Why is the developer coming to the QA team then?
I didn't say, well, I use development manager. In small organizations, the development manager might be the VP of engineering. It might be the one who has the final say of what goes out the door. Depends on the organization. My point is, somebody with authority who makes the decision has told you this is what they need. How far are you willing to go with it? Are you willing to say, okay, I'll make sure that it meets your needs? Or are you willing to say, you know what? I'm uncomfortable with that language. That makes me very nervous. Because what you're saying to me is, you want this out the door, so you want me to test a certain way. And you want me to confirm that the product will work in most cases. Is that really what you want me to do? Now, you put somebody on the defensive like that, I don't want to, seriously, you're going into dangerous territory, quite frankly. But it's an important conversation to have. So how can you have that conversation? Now let me flip it for you. And I'm going to say C-class executive, CTO, CFO, whatever, whoever pulls the real strings and makes the real decisions. Hey, QA manager, QA team, can I gather everybody in the office here? Okay, we've got this feature that, it needs to go out on Friday. Oh man, I cannot begin to tell you how much is riding on this feature. This is like our company, this is our life. If we screw this up, it's over. The doors are going to be closed and everybody's going to have to find work. Me too. Please, I beg you. If there is something wrong with this, find it. Show me where we screwed up. Now what bias have I planted in your head?
Needs help to check the quality of the product.
More than that, I've actually given you a directive. There is something wrong. You have to find it. I promise you, if you were faced with an A/B test, take 2 testers on a team, have 2 people play out this scenario. A, show me that everything works okay. B, something's desperately wrong, I need you to find it. I promise you those 2 people will test differently.
Yeah.
They will test differently because their biases have been triggered. And because their biases have been triggered, they're going to react. Oh, we want to make sure it works? Okay, happy path testing it is. Woohoo. There's something terribly wrong? All right, every weapon I've got, let's go. We're going to take out a whole new wall. Your bias defines how you act, and your biases are always with you. You could also go the same way. What if, though, let me throw the flip side, stepping it aside. Are you sure that something's wrong? What gives you the feeling that there's a problem here? Is it a gut feeling? Is there some evidence? Have you had something that's happened that's given you reason to believe that we could? Because you could then, throw everything at the app, and there's nothing wrong. Everything's good. The app is solid. Is that a bad thing? Well, if you spent a week throwing 70 hours of testing at this product using every conceivable out there thing, that might be good. But could that time have been used to do something more productive? Like work on something that maybe was broken or that people knew was broken, or there's an area with bugs where there's some heat that might be more productive use of time? So the other bias can also work against you because you're so primed now to look for something wrong that you're looking for something wrong where there's nothing wrong or there's very little wrong. And you'll come up with any excuse to slander the product because, oh my gosh, there's something terrible here. So here's all the terrible things that I found. Well, those aren't really terrible, but I'm with you. They're inconvenient. They're kind of sloppy. But no, that's not going to close the doors on us. But yeah, we'll pass on that. It's okay. Maybe for the next release, et cetera, et cetera. So the bias works both ways, and it's important.
As a QA, I won't be stressed out. Why should I be stressed out and say that, oh, these are all terrible.
Right.
These are all these things. Why? I have my own opinion.
Which is good, because with that, you can debias, and you're jumping ahead of me. So I already said the thought experiment here, is to just check people's political views and notice that somebody's political view or some statement that's done with it, they're going to say something one way, versus if they know that whoever presented something was from their chosen political party, they'll react a very different way. That's why I oftentimes said, would it be great if you had to actually present something where two people, one from each party, I'm using the American system because, well, it's a hot topic right now, but one person from the Democratic Party, one person from the Republican Party have to come together. They have to craft a piece of legislation. They have to put it out there for public comment. Both of them contributed equally to it. It's both of their babies. Or we just put it out there and said, we're not going to tell you who actually did it, but here it is. Now vote on it on its merits, or look at it on its merits, debate it on its merits. You're going to say one thing. You're going to say, well, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard, or, well, that's a really, really brilliant, smart idea. But then it comes out that, oh, your favorite politician or your congressman presented this. Is it now a stupid idea? Or is it something that you support because it's your person? Or you thought it was maybe actually kind of a common sense idea, but now you vehemently depose it because the opposition is the one who presented it. Confirmation bias, fun stuff. I already gave you this example here. So I have a couple of video clips that I want to show you here to talk a little bit about some different biasing. Let me just see if I can grab this. Hang on a second, sorry. And I hope it's loud enough for you to do this. So who here has participated in or understands, oh, cool, understands what's what we call inattentional blindness? Is that a new term? Anybody ever heard that term before? I'm going to introduce it to you. So hopefully this works. Shh. If you know it, shh.
You know it?
He might. He might. All right, let's see if this comes through.
This is an awareness task. How many blue balloons go to the first teller? The answer is 9. But did you notice Breezy the clown?
So that is your classic inattentional blindness exercise. If you've never been part of it before, the whole point is you're asked to look at something specific. As you're looking at something specific, something out of the ordinary is happening in your periphery, and you completely miss it because you're not looking at it. Now, of course, once you've shown this to somebody, you've primed a pump in them, and now they're going to say, oh, another awareness test? Oh, this is Breezy the clown, or this is the moonwalking bear, or this is the gorilla, or whatever. So now they're thinking, you want me to look at something, but there's something else going on. So I'm gonna pay more attention to it. You're not gonna fool me the second time. Really? Let's find out. How am I doing for time, by the way?
Pretty much there, but you know, each of
Okay.
these.
This is
Yeah.
typically where I
Yeah.
bring it anyway. So we're doing really good.
Yeah, but it's a solution.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Hey, that's confusing.
Already lost it, huh?
Yeah, already lost. Oh, real monkey game.
The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla?
Yes.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla.
Yeah, I think,
If you knew about the gorilla, you probably
Such a big
saw it.
TV column.
But did you notice the curtain changing color for the player on the black team leaving the game?
Mhm.
Let's rewind and watch it again.
Most people miss the color change because it happens gradually.
Here comes the gorilla, and there
Oh,
goes
yeah,
a player.
notice the leaves.
The curtain is changing from red to gold.
Cool.
When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events.
That's very cool.
All right. So in this case, the first thing that happened was I gave you a directive. You know, we're looking for one thing. And the first time you did it, you focused on the one thing, and something weird happened on the side. And the second time, you thought, they're going to throw something on the side. So I'm going to, spread my peripheral vision, and I'm going to pay attention better. Yet you miss the changing of the color, or you miss the person leaving, or something else happens there, or you miss the count. Because you're so focused now, you lost count of what you were looking for in the first place, right? What you're looking at here is what's called cognitive overload. And cognitive overload happens to every one of us. It's a great term, by the way, if somebody comes into you in a meeting, in a hot fury, saying, "How could you miss that bug?" You now have a very good answer. Cognitive overload, sir. Ma'am, president, whatever. Cognitive overload.
I'm going to use it.
Beg your pardon? Well, you have us looking for so many things in such a compressed amount of time. We're focusing on as many of them as we possibly can. There's just no way that our peripheral vision is going to capture every single possible thing. It's a fact. If you're aware of that and you're alert to that, the nice thing is you can have this conversation before the conversation of, you need to test everything, we need to go get that. Okay, cognitive overload is going to set in, we're going to miss stuff. What I think you really want to have a question about is, what are the biggest risks? Do we know what the biggest risks are with this product? Have we done a risk analysis? I know that that's a really heavy word, or 2 words. But if we do a risk analysis and we figure out from top to bottom what things really matter, if we go and, if we bring up a throw an exception, and that throw an exception cascades us into a screen of death, that's bad, right? How big's the risk of that? Well, I've just proven it's actually pretty high. So we might want to really focus some attention on error messaging versus how many of our customers actually use this reverse, random, raster emulation step? 1/100th of 1%. How influential is that 100th of 1%? Are they hobbyist users or are they industrial lights and magic? Oh, they're like a hobbyist user? Okay, is it okay if we skip that this time? No, we have to, but you just said it's all the way down here. It's not that important. This is important. Choice. Raster render backwards, crashing error messages. Okay, I get your point. Focus on the raster errors. Great. Cognitive overload averted, or at least diminished considerably, because now you're focusing on the risk that matters instead of trying to fit everything into one box desperately. So I got one last one here, and this is the fun one because this one is what we call the directiveless test to see how much you can follow. And I hope I got this right. Again, I made this a little while back, so as is often the case, YouTube videos sometimes disappear. So I'm pretty sure that, yep.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed. Constable, arrest Lady Smythe. How did you know? Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation.
Everyone is holding up
Is how observant were you?
something to kill him.
21, I saw one.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want you to tell me your whereabouts.
Oh my God, the dead body.
Dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed. Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
That's cognitive overload.
That's very cool.
All right. Good. I got a chance to get through these. This is great. Most of these, by the way, are used as public service announcements in the UK about the fact that if you're focused on something that's distracting, you're not paying attention to stuff that could really matter. They're usually used for drunk driving or for distracted driving PSAs. And that's why on this one, a busy road, this could be fatal.
Yeah.
So, all right. And let's wrap this. I'm pretty close to done. So, play from current slide. Come on. Please tell me you'll pick up a current slide. Yes, good. All right. So if anybody wants to hang out a little bit later, I do have one that I can show you. This is a classic example, and this is one where you start to build what we call the illusion of control, where you think you know what's going on until you don't. And this is a classic little, camp game or whatever, and this is what we call the pen test. This could go on for hours, so I'm only going to set it up. I'm going to set up the example for you. If you really want to know how to play it, I'll be happy to show you how it's played and ways that you can vary it. But the idea is the same. So the classic way is, this is a pen test, okay? If this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen? There are two answers, yes or no. Based on what I do, the answer will either be yes or no. Your mission is to figure out what is the bit that flips it from yes to no. And if you're the one facilitating this, you have to be consistent. It can be subtle, it can be very slight, but if you decide that under this set of procedures, it's a yes. Under this set of procedures, it's a no. You have to be consistent about it. You can't change it midway. So the way that I oftentimes play this, and you might want to edit this out because this is a fairly popular test game, and if it's given out so that everybody knows it, and generally you can change it any way you want to. But here's the way that I usually play it. Okay, watch. If this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen? Yes. If this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen? No. What did I do differently? We could do this all night. Seriously. And I actually have. I have brought veteran testers to tears over this. There's actually at CAS 2011 in the background of a recorded talk because we were in an open space. And I was giving the pen test to one of the testers there. And you hear this one person's recorded talk and blah, 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 and they're doing this whole thing. And out of the corner of of the thing. Are you blanking me? Like, although much, because he figured out what the thing was. And when he realized what it was, he went, seriously? So let me give you the example in this way. Okay, watch. If this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen? The answer is yes. If this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen?
Yes.
No.
Well, it's the same thing.
You think so. You think it's the same thing.
You're holding the same way.
But did I do something different? I'll narrow this down because I respect your time. You got to get back to the city. This is the way the game worked. So, okay, watch. If this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen? That's my yes. The reason it's a yes was because I prepended your attention by saying, okay, watch. You think it's a directive. You think I'm trying to get your attention. That's actually the bit that I set so that it's a yes. Next time I did it, I said, if this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen? I didn't say, okay, watch. That's why it's a no. But you can have fun with this and you can throw other things in. Like when I did that. That would be an obvious red herring. For me giving it, I'm giving you a red herring. He shook his hands. That's got to be the no. But if I said, okay, watch. If this is a pen and this is a pen, is this a pen? No. Yes. That's why this is why I use this example. This illustrates a wonderful bias called the illusion of control, where you think you know what's going on until something happens where you realize you have no idea what's going on. And where this is really frustrating is if you happen to play this game, like the very first time I played this game, and I got 8 of them in a row right. And I thought that I knew what the answer was. And on the 9th time, I was wrong. I had built a mental model of what the game was, how it worked, what the factors were, and everything else, only to realize that most of my mental model was based on either red herrings or faulty assumptions or something that I put too much attention to that I thought was more important than it should have been. And I missed the obvious trigger. And it took me an hour of playing the game and asking them questions and setting up all sorts of different things. I mean, to the point where I had them speak in monotone, I had them turn around in circles, I had them give me 5 yeses, I had them give me 5 nos, I had closed my eyes, I turned my back, and finally, because I closed my eyes and I turned my back, when I heard, okay, watch, what do you mean? And I was like, each time I did it, I had that natural instinct I was going to turn around. No. Okay, watch. And then it dawned on me, wait, I can't watch. My back's turned. My eyes are closed. What am I going to look at? Is that the trigger? And then I said, okay, go for it. And so every time he said, okay, watch, I said yes. And every time he said, didn't say it, no. And I verified it 10 times in a row. And then I finally said, it's the okay, watch, isn't it? He says, yes, it is. Now you would think, oh, game's ruined. Can't play the game anymore. Not true. You, as the person giving the test, control what the trigger is. You can make it up. That could be your trigger, or that could be your trigger, or, roll your shoulders, or something that you want, whatever it is. You can vary any other piece of what you're doing, but your trigger, the bit that flips, you must be consistent with. Can't vary it. If you do, you've created an unfair test, to go back to where I was before. So that's a little fun thing to play with. All right? And so let's talk a little bit about debiasing. And because that's really what you want to get any tester, veteran or new. Look for opinions and ideas that directly contradict your own and give them a fair shake. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to sell your soul. But consider them. The mark of an educated person is somebody willing to entertain an opinion without having to accept it. I think that's Aristotle. Look for other explanations from objective sources. Understand the context of the product or an application being used. Try to learn about the product through discovery, not through mandates. In other words, just because the spec tells you that that's what it should be doing, don't necessarily take it at face value. the app is telling you differently based on your own observations, who's right? It's possible the spec may be wrong. Not always, but sometimes. Give it a fair shake. Attention bias. Shift your focus frequently. Learn to break up areas into smaller sections and see how systems interact with one another. Or see how other people interact with the system. You might get a new insight from it. All right, illusion of control, like with the pen test. Strip away unnecessary variables. What is in or out of your control? Ask questions and try to avoid assumptions. And if there are inconsistencies, follow up on them. All right. Close, it was a little over, I'm sorry. But, so there's a bunch of further discussion topics that we can have here, and if possible, if you guys like what I do and you think this is worth talking about, I could actually come back and talk about each of these. Which is like, what is the software development, the software test lifecycle, and why should you care about it? How does the web work? It's actually a really big topic, and if you get that, a lot of testing suddenly falls into place. And there are group testing options that you can use. If you've never heard of mob programming, it's something worth looking at. Merit, I'm sorry. Merit Piraval is on Twitter. I will send her name and her link, and please forgive me for not pronouncing your name right, Merit, in case you happen to see this. But she's done a lot of work with mob programming and a lot of blogging on it. She's a great resource about it. It's totally worth looking up. Weekend testing is an initiative that I help with. It started in India, and it's very active in India. It has been for several years. I'm the founder and facilitator for the Americas chapter, and it is a model that anybody can use, in the sense that you just get together on Skype or some messaging system that you can type chats for, and it's experiential learning. You take a problem, you take a scenario, you work on it as a group together, and you talk about it. Talk about what you're discovering. You talk about your mission. You talk about your charter. And if somebody has an aha moment, explore that with them. And ask them why they think that might be something worth thinking about or considering. If they find a real bug, notate it. Give them credit for it. High five them for it.
So it's done on weekend only, that's all?
Well, it's called weekend testing because historically we do it on weekends, or we do it on like Saturday or Sunday mornings, at a time when somebody doesn't have to do their day job. But the idea is, because that's what it's called, and that's when, in India they classically did it, because they just don't have time during any other point of the day. And it's taken off very well, and we do it here in the States. We're up to like 75 sessions that we've done so far. And we usually do them the first or second Saturday of any given month. So you go on Twitter and just look for the hashtag weekend testing. You can see what the next session is and just jump in. Hi, I want to be part of this. Can I see what goes on? And after you do enough of them, you go, oh, I see how this works. I get how this is structured. Dang, I could use this in my own company. Please, do.
So now the weekends are common also?
We try to make it fun and social. It's not necessarily like and typically we'll try to pick up something that would be at least interesting.
Instead of 75 hours, now it's 95 hours.
But the point is that the weekend testing model can be used anywhere, at any time, with anybody. If you want to, you can just all gather together in a room and do the same thing. It's kind of what mob testing is, or QASource testing. It's the same idea. But in this case, the focus isn't so much on what did you test and what bugs did you find. It's what interesting principles did we cover? What can we share with other people? What do we know about this that maybe some other people don't? And can they learn? And what do they know that I don't know? What can I learn from them? Usually time-boxed and with a specific topic or focus.
Can you bring it into LinkedIn?
Can you bring it into LinkedIn? I wouldn't recommend bringing it into
No?
LinkedIn. It's
Oh.
because it's real time. It's meant to be real time. Skype is what we've used, but it's a model. And if you find the model is useful someplace else, go ahead and use it. And if you want to improve upon it or use it for a different group of people, that where Skype, it's too limiting, I'd rather use some other app where we can speak in real time and talk about it and capture that in video form. Okay. We deliberately use Skype's chat service because chat is universal. Sadly, unfortunately, I have to actually deal with the fact that in parts of India and Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand, there's rolling blackouts. And there's bandwidth issues. So I have to be very
respectful of the fact that I can't say, hey, we're gonna be doing a video chat and jump on and make sure that you've got, 100 megabyte download pipe. For some people, that's just not real world, it's not possible. So I need to respect that. And so that's how this model has grown over years of experimentation, and it works pretty darn well. But you can take it and use it other places. And again, one of the things that I'm looking at with doing this, I didn't actually tell you where this all came from. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but this was all formed from an initiative that the Obama Summer Jobs Plus program started in 2012 and ran for a few years, called Summer Camp, Summer QAMP. And the idea was we wanted to introduce software testing principles to people who may not have had much STEM exposure in their school lives, inner city kids or less technologically advantaged and enabled people, and give them an opportunity to learn about software testing so that they could be qualified to be interns at technology companies. It was a successful program. It worked very well for the years that it was run. It's winding down now because the administration's winding down, and maybe the next, depends whether it's President Sanders or Trump or Biden.
So he has opened it up, that's why it's winding down? Or now it belongs to everyone who
Well,
is participating?
we developed, so I and a number of other people that are part of the Association for Software Testing, we were the ones that had the quote-unquote mandate and encouragement to do this.
Okay.
We did this as a group project, and this is what we came up with. And it worked pretty darn well, we think. We discovered a few things about it. The things that we discovered are, it's best to do this in a facilitated manner. You don't just say, here, go read these slides. Which is why I'm saying, if I give you these slides, which I'm giving you, this is a condensed version of it. There's a lot more surrounding it that we use. But this is a very condensed, filtered version of what we can do, and this will suffice. But don't just hand the slides to somebody and say, here, read this, and come back and talk to me about it. Physically work through each one of the examples and talk about it, facilitate it. See how they learn, see what questions they bring that might challenge your thinking. And let that be an exchange, because that exchange is what makes it so that A, they feel confident to keep trying. They feel confident to jump into the fray and try things out. And while you can't teach curiosity, you can create an environment where curiosity will bubble to the surface. And that's it. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thanks, Michael.
Our old podcast is the same as that.
Huh?
Our your podcast is the same as this.
We covered some